A single mother got fired for being late after helping an injured man, unaware he was the billionaire boss of the company she worked for. "You are 10 minutes late, and you are fired." The rain hammered down on the glass panes of the corporate skyscraper, a relentless, pounding rhythm against the sterile silence of the lobby. Alara clutched the threadbare strap of her worn bag, the biting cold of the marble floor seeping through the thin soles of her shoes, a stark contrast to the feverish worry that thudded in her chest. She was soaked, her pale face streaked with water that mingled with the unspoken tears glistening in her weary eyes. The words of her manager, Ms. Albright, echoed in the cavernous space, each syllable a sharp, polished stone thrown at her fragile hope. 10 minutes. 10 minutes had shattered her world. The rain had been a gray sheet, a deluge that turned the city streets into slick, treacherous mirrors. She had been running, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs, the image of her daughter Lily's small, trusting face pushing her forward. Lily's cough had been worse this morning, a dry, brittle sound that seemed to splinter the quiet air of their tiny apartment. The medicine was expensive, the rent was due, and this job, this soul-crushing data entry position in the sterile basement of Sterling Enterprises, was the single, fraying thread holding them above the abyss of true desperation. She had left early, accounting for the storm, but fate, in its cruel and indifferent way, had intervened. A man had fallen. A quiet gasp had escaped her lips as she saw him go down, his body hitting the merciless concrete with a sickening thud. He was older, dressed in a simple, worn coat, his face etched with a profound, hollow grief that seemed to resonate with the storm itself. Around him, the city's relentless pulse continued, people sidestepping his prone form with the casual cruelty of the hurried and the preoccupied. But Alara had stopped. She couldn't not stop. Her own mother's voice, a gentle echo from a life before loss and hardship, whispered in her memory. Kindness costs nothing and is worth everything. So she had knelt in the pouring rain, the cold water soaking through the knees of her only decent pair of work trousers. She had helped the stranger to his feet, her own problems momentarily vanishing in the face of his quiet, dignified pain. A small, ornate silver locket had fallen from his grasp, and she had picked it up from a puddle, its polished surface gleaming even in the dim gray light. His hand trembled as he took it from her, his eyes, haunted and deep, meeting hers for a fleeting, sacred moment. He had a gash on his forehead, and without a second thought, she had pulled out her last clean handkerchief, a small square of embroidered cotton her grandmother had given her, and gently dabbed at the blood. She then pressed her own battered umbrella into his hand and tucked the last $5 bill from her wallet into his coat pocket. "For a hot tea," she had said, her voice soft but steady. "Please, get somewhere warm." He had simply stared, a flicker of something unreadable, shock, disbelief, awe in his gaze. He hadn't said a word. He just stood there, clutching the locket and the umbrella, a silent statue in the downpour as she turned and ran, her own sacrifice a small, unspoken prayer sent out into the storm. She didn't know it yet, but this moment, this simple, selfless act of pure, unadulterated kindness, would change everything. It was the catalyst for a seismic shift in her universe. A single coin dropped into a well of despair whose ripples would return as a tidal wave of salvation. But in this moment, standing before the crisp, impeccable form of Ms. Albright, all she felt was the crushing weight of consequence. The manager's eyes, cold and dismissive, raked over Alara's drenched and disheveled appearance. Sterling Enterprises values punctuality above all else. It is a sign of discipline and respect. You have shown neither. The words were clipped, devoid of any empathy. They were the sterile pronouncements of a system that saw only numbers on a spreadsheet, not the trembling, desperate woman standing before it. Alara's own voice, when she finally found it, was a fragile whisper. "Please, Ms. Albright, I can explain. There was an accident. A man was hurt." Ms. Albright's lips curled into a faint, dismissive sneer. "Excuses are the currency of the incompetent, Ms. Vance. Your personal dramas are of no concern to this company. Pack your desk. Security will escort you out." She turned away, a sharp, final gesture that severed the last thread of Alara's hope. She was gone. The walk back to her desk in the basement felt like a descent into a tomb. The flickering fluorescent lights overhead cast long, dancing shadows that seemed to mock her, and the rhythmic click-clack of keyboards sounded like a death knell. Her colleagues, heads bowed, refused to meet her gaze, their silence a heavy blanket of complicity and fear. She packed her few belongings into a small cardboard box, a framed picture of Lily smiling, a small, chipped mug that said "World's Best Mom," and a wilting plant she had tried so hard to keep alive. Each object was a testament to a life lived on the margins, a life of quiet dignity now being publicly dismantled. The security guard, a large man with surprisingly gentle eyes, stood by, his presence a stark reminder of her new status as an outcast. He didn't rush her. As she clutched the box to her chest and walked towards the exit, the weight of her failure was unbearable. It wasn't just a job she had lost. It was their home, Lily's medicine, their future. The $5 she had given to the stranger now felt like a fortune she had recklessly thrown away. The act of kindness that had felt so right, so necessary, now seemed like an act of profound foolishness. Her mother's words echoed again, but this time they were tinged with a bitter irony. What was kindness worth when it left your child vulnerable? The rain was still pounding against the pavement as she stepped outside, but now she had no umbrella to shield her. She pulled her thin jacket tighter, the cardboard box growing damp in her arms, and began the long, slow walk home. The city, which had once seemed full of promise, now felt like a vast, indifferent ocean threatening to swallow her whole. Every step was a battle against the despair that clawed at her throat. She thought of Lily, waiting for her at their neighbor's apartment, her small body racked with coughs, and a sob finally escaped Alara's tightly clenched jaw. It was a raw, shattered sound, lost in the roar of the storm. She was alone, utterly and completely alone. Little did she know, she was being watched. From the sleek, black car parked across the street, a pair of haunted, unwavering eyes followed her every move. Alistair Sterling sat in the back of his limousine, the worn coat and shabby clothes he'd been wearing now discarded on the seat beside him. He was dressed in a crisp, impeccably tailored suit, but his expression was anything but commanding. It was an expression of raw, unvarnished shock. He held the small, embroidered handkerchief in one hand and the silver locket in the other. Her handkerchief, it smelled faintly of lavender and rain. The locket contained a miniature portrait of his late wife, Amelia, her smile a ghost from a happier time. Today was the anniversary of her death, the day he always shed his billionaire skin and walked the city streets as a ghost himself, seeking some connection to the world he had lost. He had never found it, until today. This woman, this stranger, had shown him more genuine, selfless humanity in 10 minutes than he had witnessed in the 10 years since Amelia's passing. She had sacrificed her own comfort, her own money, her own security, for a man she believed to be as destitute as herself. And she had paid the price. He had seen it all. He had followed her, intending to return her umbrella and thank her properly, and had witnessed the cruel, public dismissal. He had heard Ms. Albright's heartless words echo in the lobby. A cold, unfamiliar rage, an emotion he hadn't felt in a decade, had coiled in his gut. His world, which had been gray and muted with grief, was suddenly, sharply in focus. A new purpose began to dawn in his soul, a quiet, steady flame lit by a stranger's kindness. He watched her drenched, retreating figure, a symbol of pure-hearted resilience in a world that had tried to break her. He would not let it succeed. He picked up his phone, his thumb hovering over the contact for his head of security. "Find out everything you can about a woman named Alara Vance," he said, his voice low and firm, a quiet promise made to the weeping woman in the storm. "And get me all the files on a manager named Albright." A new mission had begun. He would repay her kindness, not with a simple thank you, but with a quiet, unseen salvation that would mend the pieces of her shattered life. He would become her hidden savior. The days that followed her firing were a blur of mounting panic and quiet resolve. The final paycheck was a pittance, barely enough to cover a week's worth of groceries and a fraction of Lily's new, more expensive medication. The eviction notice, a stark white paper taped to their door, felt like a physical blow, its bold, black letters shouting their failure to the entire apartment building. Alara spent her nights staring at the ceiling, the relentless hammering of her heart a frantic companion in the dark. During the day, she put on a brave face for Lily, her smile a thin, brittle shield against the encroaching despair. She sold her late husband's watch, the last tangible piece of him she owned, the transaction feeling like a betrayal. She applied for dozens of jobs, anything and everything, but her resume was thin, and the market was unforgiving. Each rejection email was another small cut, bleeding her of hope. Then the strange, small miracles began. First, an envelope appeared under their door. It was plain, with no return address. Inside was a cashier's check for the exact amount of their overdue rent, plus 2 months in advance. Alara stared at it, her hands trembling. She thought it was a mistake, a cruel prank. But when she took it to the bank, the teller confirmed it was real. The relief was so profound, so seismic, that she had to sit down on a bench outside, a sob of pure, unadulterated gratitude catching in her throat. Who would do such a thing? A few days later, a large box of groceries was delivered to their door from an upscale market she could never afford. It was filled with fresh fruit, organic vegetables, and all of Lily's favorite snacks. The delivery receipt simply said, "A gift from a friend." There was no name. The most significant miracle came in the form of a phone call. It was from the office of Dr. Eris Thorne, the country's leading pediatric pulmonologist, a doctor whose waiting list was years long and whose fees were astronomical. His receptionist informed Alara that an anonymous benefactor had not only secured an immediate appointment for Lily, but had also covered the full cost of any and all recommended treatments. Alara was speechless, the phone feeling heavy and surreal in her hand. It was too much. It was impossible. These anonymous acts of kindness were a lifeline, a golden glow in the encroaching darkness. But they were also a mystery that left her feeling profoundly unsettled. It was as if a guardian angel was watching over them, a quiet, unseen force pushing back against the tide of their misfortune. She had no idea how close to the truth she was. From his penthouse office overlooking the city, Alistair Sterling watched. He had a team discreetly monitoring her situation, their reports delivered to him daily. He read about her selling the watch, and a pang of something akin to guilt shot through him. He had not acted fast enough. He authorized the rent payment, the groceries, the doctor. Each action was a carefully calibrated response to her needs, a way of repaying his debt without revealing himself. It was not just about money. For Alistair, it was about restoring the balance of the universe. Her act of pure goodness had to be met with an equal, opposing force of grace. He found himself obsessed with the details of her life. He learned about her husband, a firefighter who had died in the line of duty. He learned about Lily's chronic asthma, a condition that had haunted Alara since her daughter's birth. He learned about her quiet dignity, her unwavering love for her child, her resilience in the face of relentless hardship. He saw in her the same gentle strength that had defined his Amelia. The more he learned, the more he felt this undeniable pull, this profound need to see her again, not as a billionaire benefactor, but as the man she had helped. He wanted to understand the source of her light, so he put on the old, worn coat again. He left the sterile opulence of his world behind and walked to the small, unassuming park near her apartment building, a place his reports said she took Lily every sunny afternoon. He sat on a bench, the silver locket warm in his pocket, and waited. He didn't have to wait long. She appeared at the edge of the park, holding her daughter's small hand. The golden glow of the late afternoon sun seemed to halo them, a stark contrast to the memory of the drenched, desperate woman he had last seen. Lily was laughing, a sound that was clearer and less strained than before, a testament to the new medicine that was already working. Alara's face, though still etched with a certain weariness, had a softness to it now, the sharp edges of panic having been smoothed away by the recent mysterious relief. She looked up and her eyes met his, a flicker of recognition, Then surprise crossed her features. He gave a small, hesitant smile. He stood up and walked towards her, his heart pounding with an unfamiliar nervousness. This was more terrifying than any boardroom negotiation. "Hello," he said, his voice quiet. "I don't know if you remember me." The man with the umbrella, Elara's eyes widened slightly. "Of course I remember. Are you all right?" Your head, she reached up instinctively, as if to check the wound that had long since healed. "I'm fine," he said, a genuine warmth spreading through his chest at her sincere concern. "Thanks to you. I never got to thank you properly. You disappeared so quickly. I was late for work," she said, the words carrying a shadow of the pain he knew they held. He saw the flicker of sadness in her eyes and felt that cold rage stir within him again. He had fired Ms. Albright, of course, a swift and merciless termination for gross misconduct. But the damage had been done. He pushed the anger down. This wasn't the time. "I also wanted to return this," he said, pulling her battered umbrella from a bag he carried. It was clean and dry now. And this, he held out a crisp $50 bill. "For the tea and the handkerchief." It was far more than $5 worth of kindness. Elara shook her head immediately, her hands held up in a gesture of refusal. "No, please. Couldn't. I was happy to help." Lily, who had been hiding shyly behind her mother's legs, peeked out, her curious eyes fixed on Alistair. "Mama helped you 'cause you fell down," she said, her small voice clear as a bell. Alistair's gaze softened as he looked at the little girl. He knelt down to her level. "Yes, she did. Your mama is a very kind person." A hero. A faint blush colored Elara's cheeks. "I'm no hero. I just did what anyone would have done." "No," Alistair said, his eyes rising to meet hers again, his voice holding a new, profound intensity. "That's where you're wrong. Not anyone would have done that. In my experience, almost no one would have." The unspoken weight of his loneliness, of his grief-stricken, cynical world, hung in the air between them. A connection was forged in that moment, an unspoken understanding that transcended their vastly different circumstances. They were two souls who had known profound loss. They continued to talk, their conversation easy and natural. He didn't tell her his name, and she didn't ask. He was simply the man from the rain. He asked about her daughter, and she spoke of Lily with a fierce, tender love that was breathtaking to witness. She told him about the new doctor, the miracle that had happened, her voice filled with a wonder and gratitude that he was secretly the cause of. Listening to her, Alistair felt the thick, icy walls he had built around his heart begin to thaw. This woman, with her quiet strength and selfless spirit, was a force of nature. She was sunlight after a decade of rain. As the sun began to set, casting long amber hues across the park, Elara knew she had to leave. "It was good to see you again," she said, her smile genuine. "I'm glad you're okay." "Could I," Alistair began, his voice hesitant. "Could I perhaps see you again? Maybe we could get that cup of tea you offered." He held his breath. He had billions of dollars, immense power, but in that moment, her answer felt more important than any business deal. Elara hesitated for a fraction of a second, a flicker of caution in her eyes. But then she looked at the kind, haunted face of the man before her, and she saw not a stranger, but a kindred spirit. "I'd like that," she said softly. It was a simple agreement, but for both of them it felt like a promise. A new beginning. Their second meeting was a few days later, over a cup of tea in her small, spotlessly clean apartment. The air was filled with the scent of cinnamon and the soft hush of a quiet afternoon. Lily was at a neighbor's, leaving them in a bubble of peaceful solitude. The setting was a world away from Alistair's ornate, cavernous mansion, yet he had never felt more at home. The worn armchair he sat in was more comfortable than any of his polished leather ones. The chipped mug she handed him, filled with simple, fragrant tea, felt more valuable than the finest crystal. They sat in a comfortable silence for a moment, the space between them filled with an unspoken curiosity. This was the moment for the confession. "You seem to carry a great sadness with you," Elara said gently, her voice not prying, but simply observant. Her directness disarmed him. He looked down at the silver locket, which he had taken from his pocket and was now turning over and over in his hands. "It belonged to my wife," he said, the words feeling rusty from disuse. He hadn't spoken her name to a stranger in years. Her name was Amelia. She passed away 10 years ago. He finally looked up, his eyes raw and vulnerable, meeting Alara's steady, unwavering gaze. He felt seen, truly seen for the first time in a decade. Encouraged by her quiet empathy, he continued, the story pouring out of him like a river breaking through a dam. He told her about Amelia, about their whirlwind romance, about the life they had planned to build together. He told her about the car accident, a senseless, random tragedy that had stolen her from him in an instant. He spoke of the suffocating grief, the hollow years that followed, a life of immense material wealth that was emotionally bankrupt. "The day you helped me," he confessed, his voice cracking slightly. "It was the anniversary of her death. I walked the city on that day every year. I don't know why. To feel close to her, I suppose. To feel anything at all. But mostly, I just feel invisible." Alara listened, her expression one of profound compassion. She didn't offer empty platitudes or trite condolences. Instead, when he finished, she simply reached across the small table and placed her hand gently on his arm. The warmth of her touch was a jolt, a current of life that seemed to flow directly into his weary soul. It was a simple, sacred gesture of human connection. "I'm so sorry for your loss," she said, her voice a soft anchor in his sea of grief. "I understand what it's like to lose the person who is your entire world." Now it was her turn. She told him about her husband, Mark, about his laughter that could fill a room, his quiet strength, his selfless bravery as a firefighter. She spoke of the night she got the call, the sterile silence of the hospital waiting room, the moment her world had splintered into a million irreparable pieces. She described the struggle of raising Lily alone, of seeing her husband's smile in their daughter's face every day, a constant, bittersweet reminder of what she had lost. She confessed her deepest fear, not being enough for Lily, of failing the one person she had left to live for. As she spoke, Alistair saw the immense depth of her character. She was not defined by her suffering, but by the love that endured in spite of it. They were two halves of a whole, their separate tragedies forging an undeniable, cathartic bond between them. Their shared grief was a bridge, not a chasm. When she finished, her eyes were glistening with unshed tears. Alistair felt an overwhelming urge to protect this woman, to shelter her from any further pain, to give her the security and peace she so profoundly deserved. He knew, with an unshakable certainty, that his feelings for her were growing beyond gratitude and admiration. It was something deeper, something more tender and raw. He was falling in love with her. He still hadn't told her who he was. The deception gnawed at him, a small, dark corner in this otherwise luminous connection. He was afraid that the truth of his wealth and power would shatter this fragile, authentic bond they were building. He wanted her to know him, the man, not the myth. But he knew he couldn't hide forever. The time was coming when he would have to reveal himself, and he prayed that the foundation they were building would be strong enough to withstand the revelation. For now, he held on to this precious, quiet moment, a brief respite from the complexities of his other life. In this small apartment with this remarkable woman, he wasn't a billionaire. He was just a man, finally finding his way out of the shadows. He was healing. The need for a steady income, however, remained a pressing reality for Alara. Despite the anonymous gifts that had kept her afloat, she knew she couldn't rely on a mysterious benefactor forever. Her pride and her deep-seated need for self-reliance demanded that she stand on her own 2 feet. After weeks of searching, she finally found a temporary position through a catering agency. The pay was decent and the work, while demanding, was straightforward. Her first major assignment was a large, high-profile event, the annual Sterling Enterprises Foundation Gala. The irony was not lost on her. To be serving champagne and canapés in the opulent ballroom of the company that had so carelessly discarded her was a bitter pill to swallow. But she squared her shoulders, put on the crisp, black and white uniform, and resolved to do her job with the same quiet dignity she brought to everything else. She needed the money for Lily. That was all that mattered. The ballroom was a dizzying spectacle of wealth and power. Gleaming chandeliers cast a golden glow over ornate tables, and the air buzzed with the conversations of the city's elite. Men in impeccable tuxedos and women in glittering gowns moved through the cavernous space, their laughter echoing off the polished marble floors. Alara moved among them, a ghost in a uniform, her tray of appetizers held steady. She kept her head down, focusing on her tasks, trying to remain invisible. But fate had other plans. Across the room, she saw a familiar, unwelcome face. It was Ms. Albright. Her former manager was dressed in a shimmering, emerald green dress, a predatory smile on her face as she networked with a group of executives. Their eyes met across the crowded room, and a look of pure, venomous shock crossed Ms. Albright's features, quickly replaced by a cruel, triumphant smirk. Alara's heart thudded. She tried to turn away, to melt back into the anonymity of the service staff, but it was too late. Ms. Albright began to walk towards her, her path cutting a deliberate, commanding line through the crowd. This was the moment the universe had been building towards. The stage was set for the climax. Ms. Albright stopped directly in front of Alara, her voice loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. Well, look what we have here. I should have known you'd find a way to slither back into a place you don't belong." Alara's face paled. "Ms. Albright, please. I'm just working." The plea was a whisper. "Working?" Ms. Albright let out a short, sharp laugh. "Or casing the joint. Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, her voice rising dramatically, capturing the attention of the surrounding guests. "Be sure to hold onto your wallets and your jewelry. This woman was fired from our company for a reason. She's untrustworthy. A desperate, common thief." The accusation hung in the air, sharp and poisonous. A circle of curious onlookers began to form. Alara stood frozen, the heavy tray trembling in her hands. Humiliation, hot and sharp, washed over her. She felt 100 pairs of eyes on her, judging, dissecting. She remained dignified, her back straight, but inside she was shattering. "You do not belong here," Ms. Albright hissed, her face contorted with spite. She reached out and grabbed Alara's arm, her fingers digging in like talons. "Security! Get this riffraff out of my sight." Just as two security guards began to move towards them, a calm, commanding voice cut through the tension. "That will be quite enough, Ms. Albright." The crowd parted. A figure emerged from the edge of the circle, moving with an unhurried, powerful grace. He was dressed in a flawlessly tailored tuxedo, his presence radiating an authority that silenced the room. His eyes, cold and unwavering, were fixed on Ms. Albright. It was the man from the rain. Alara gasped, her mind struggling to process what was happening. He looked different, transformed. The worn coat and haunted expression were gone, replaced by an aura of immense power. Ms. Albright's jaw dropped. Mr. Sterling, sir, I was just removing this person who crashed the party." Alistair Sterling did not look at her. His gaze was fixed on Alara, and his expression softened into one of profound tenderness and regret. "She is not crashing," he said, his voice echoing in the sudden, sterile silence. "She is my guest." He gently removed Ms. Albright's hand from Alara's arm, his touch both a rescue and a promise. He then turned his full attention to the sputtering former manager, his eyes turning to chips of ice. "I am aware of why you fired Ms. Vance," he said, his voice dangerously low. "I am also aware that you did so without cause, without compassion, and without a shred of the decency that this company is supposed to represent. You, Ms. Albright, are the one who does not belong here." He delivered the next words with a chilling finality. "Your association with Sterling Enterprises is terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you out." Now Ms. Albright stood speechless, her face a mask of disbelief and horror. The power dynamic had been completely, seismically reversed. The guards, who moments before had been advancing on Alara, now flanked Ms. Albright, gently but firmly leading her away. Alistair then turned back to the stunned crowd, his arm protectively around Alara's shoulders. "Let me be clear to everyone," he announced, his voice ringing with authority. "This woman, Alara Vance, is the finest human being I have ever had the privilege of knowing. Her integrity and compassion represent the true soul of what Sterling Enterprises should aspire to be. She is to be shown the utmost respect by every single person in this room." Total silence. Alara stared at him, her heart pounding, her world tilting on its axis. The man she knew as a quiet, grieving stranger was Alistair Sterling, the reclusive, mysterious billionaire CEO, the owner of everything, the hidden savior, her hidden savior. He had been there all along. He led her away from the gawking crowd, his hand a steady, warm presence on the small of her back, guiding her through a set of ornate double doors into a quiet, deserted library. The sudden hush was a relief, the scent of old books and polished wood a calming balm after the chaos of the ballroom. The room was dimly lit by a single flickering lamp on a large mahogany desk, casting long shadows across the towering shelves. The sound of the door clicking shut behind them seemed to echo in the profound silence. Alara's mind was reeling, a whirlwind of disbelief and dawning understanding. The anonymous checks, the groceries, the doctor, it had all been him. Every miracle, every small act of salvation, had originated with this man who stood before her, no longer a fellow sufferer but a figure of unimaginable power. "Alistair?" she whispered, the name feeling foreign on her tongue. He winced at the unspoken accusation in her tone. He turned to face her, his own eyes filled with a raw, pleading vulnerability that stripped away the commanding CEO persona, leaving only the man she had come to know. "Alara, I am so sorry. I know I should have told you who I was. I was a coward." "A coward?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "You own half the city. I don't think you're a coward." "I was afraid," he confessed, taking a step closer. "I was afraid that if you knew, you would see the money, the power, and not me. The connection we made. It was the first real thing I have felt in 10 years. It was sacred to me. I didn't want to risk destroying it with the truth of all this." He gestured vaguely at their opulent surroundings. He reached out and gently took her hands in his. They were cold. "When you helped me that day in the rain, you weren't helping a billionaire. You were helping a man who had nothing left to offer. You gave me your umbrella, your last $5, your kindness with no expectation of reward. You reminded me that there was still purity and goodness in the world. You didn't just save me from the rain, Alara. You saved me from myself. You reawakened my heart." The sincerity in his voice was undeniable. She could see the truth of his words glistening in his eyes. The confusion and hurt that had clouded her mind began to clear, replaced by a wave of profound, cathartic emotion. He hadn't deceived her to manipulate her. He had deceived her to protect something precious. All those things, the rent, the doctor. "It was the least I could do," he said, his grip on her hands tightening slightly. "It was a clumsy attempt to repay an unpayable debt. What you gave me was hope. How could I ever repay that?" He then offered her everything. He offered her a new position at the company, not as a data entry clerk, but as the head of the Sterling Enterprises Foundation, where her compassion and integrity could change thousands of lives. He offered her a beautiful, stately home in a quiet neighborhood with a garden where Lily could play safely, free from the city's grime and pollution. He promised to take care of all of Lily's medical needs for the rest of her life, ensuring she would want for nothing. It was a dizzying, life-altering proposal. He was solving all her problems, wiping away every hardship with a wave of his powerful hand. But it was his final offer that made her heart stop. "These are all just things, Alara," he said, his voice dropping to a tender, raw whisper. "I can give them to you, and I will. But what I truly want to offer you is my heart. I have fallen in love with you. I love your strength, your quiet dignity, your unwavering kindness. I love the way you love your daughter. You and Lily have brought the light back into my world. Please, give me the chance to spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of you." Tears streamed freely down Alara's face now, But they were not tears of sorrow or humiliation. They were tears of disbelief, of hope, of a joy so profound it was almost unbearable. In the space of an hour, her life had been completely transformed. The man who had been her secret savior now stood before her, offering her not just security, but a love she thought she would never find again. She looked into his unwavering eyes and saw her future. A future free from fear, a future filled with love and safety. A future she had earned not with wealth or status, but with a simple, selfless act of kindness on a rainy day. Yes, she whispered, the word a soft, certain promise. Yes, he closed the remaining distance between them and gently, tenderly, kissed her. It was a kiss that sealed their shared past of grief and promised a future of shared healing and undeniable love. The resolution was complete. 1 year later, the sun, a brilliant, golden orb in a cloudless sky, poured down on the sprawling green lawn of a stately home. The air was filled with the sweet scent of roses and the sound of a child's joyous laughter. A little girl with bright, happy eyes and healthy, rosy cheeks ran across the grass, chasing a small, fluffy dog. It was Lily, no longer the pale, fragile child with the brittle cough, but a vibrant, thriving picture of health. A woman watched her from the stone terrace, a serene, happy smile on her face. Her simple, elegant dress caught the gentle breeze. This was Alara, but not the weary, desperate woman of a year ago. The lines of worry had been smoothed from her brow, replaced by an expression of deep, abiding peace. She held a warm mug of tea in her hands, its comforting heat a small echo of the profound warmth that now filled her life. A pair of strong arms wrapped around her from behind, and she leaned back into a familiar, loving embrace. Alistair rested his chin on her shoulder, his eyes following Lily's playful chase. The haunted look was gone from his gaze, replaced by a quiet, contented joy. "She looks happy," he said softly, his voice filled with a love that was as steady and unwavering as the sun above them. "We all are," Alara replied, turning her head to kiss him gently. Their life together was more idyllic than she could ever have imagined. It wasn't just the material comfort, though the security was a gift she thanked the universe for every day. It was the love. It was the healing. They had built a family from the broken pieces of their pasts, their shared grief becoming the foundation for a profound and unshakable bond. Alara thrived in her role as the director of the Sterling Enterprises Foundation, channeling her innate compassion into meaningful work that helped countless families who were struggling just as she once had. She had a purpose that went beyond mere survival. Alistair, in turn, had been transformed. The love of Alara and Lily had filled the cavernous, hollow spaces in his heart. He was no longer a ghost haunting his own life, but a man fully present, a loving partner and a devoted father figure to Lily. The locket with Amelia's picture now sat on his desk, not as a symbol of unbearable loss, but as a treasured memory of a love that had paved the way for a new one. It was a part of his story, not the end of it. Later that afternoon, as the golden glow of twilight settled over the garden, the three of them sat together on a soft blanket, sharing a simple picnic. Lily, tired from her playing, curled up in Alara's lap, her breathing even and clear. Alistair reached out, his hand covering both of theirs. "Thank you," he whispered, his eyes meeting Alara's over their daughter's sleeping head. "For what?" she asked, though she already knew. "For stopping in the rain," he said. And in those 4 words, the entire journey of their love was encapsulated. It was a testament to the power of a single moment of connection, a reminder that the smallest act of selfless kindness could echo through a lifetime, creating ripples of love and salvation that could heal the most shattered of hearts. They had found their happily ever after, not in a fairy tale, but in the quiet, profound reality of a love that had been earned through suffering and sealed by virtue. This story is a fable, a timeless reminder that the true measure of a person's worth lies not in their wealth or status, but in the quiet dignity of their character and the depth of their compassion. It shows us that even in our moments of deepest desperation, when the world seems cold and indifferent, a single act of selfless kindness can be a light in the darkness. Alara, in her most vulnerable state, gave what little she had to a stranger, an act of pure, unconditional humanity. She did not know that this stranger, Alistair, was a man of immense power, drowning in his own sea of grief. Her simple, gentle gesture was the lifeline he didn't know he needed, reawakening his soul and reminding him of the goodness that still existed in a transactional world. Their journey from shared tragedy to profound love illustrates a sacred truth. Our deepest wounds can become the bridges that connect us to others. It is a testament to the idea that true salvation is not about being rescued from hardship, but about being seen, understood, and loved for who we are. If this story touched your heart and reaffirmed your faith in the power of kindness, please let it be more than just a passing moment of inspiration. Let it be a reminder of the impact you can have on the world around you. You may never know if the person you help is a secret billionaire, but every person you encounter is fighting a battle you know nothing about. A small gesture of compassion can create ripples you may never see, changing a life in ways you can't possibly imagine. Your kindness matters. We invite you to join our community of viewers who believe in the power of love and redemption. Please like this video, share it with someone who needs a message of hope, and subscribe to Soulful Love Tales for more soul-stirring stories that will warm your heart and inspire your spirit. We'll see you in the next one.